It was supposed to be a peaceful new beginning. After decades of hard work, I finally had the chance to return to the home I'd always loved. This wasn't just any house. It was the place where I had built my life, the place where I had watched my children grow, and the place where every corner held a cherished memory. Life had taken me elsewhere for a while, but now, retired and ready to settle down, I was back. I had envisioned quiet mornings with a hot cup of coffee on my front porch, chatting with friendly neighbors, and simply enjoying the fruits of my labor. But as I pulled into the driveway of my own home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. There, standing across the street, was a woman with arms crossed, staring me down like a security guard eyeing a suspicious stranger. I had seen that look before. It wasn't curiosity. It was suspicion, the kind that made a person feel like they didn't belong. I barely had time to grab my suitcase before she stormed over. The HOA Queen Karen strikes. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" The words weren't laced with the warmth of a concerned neighbor. They carried the sharpness of authority, a demand for justification as if I were trespassing on sacred ground. I turned to see a woman, probably in her late 50s, dressed in perfectly pressed khakis and a cardigan that screamed, HOA President. Her hair was clipped into a tight bob, her expression was one of thinly veiled hostility, and her stance was wide, like she was bracing for a confrontation. I took a deep breath, deciding to respond with patience. "I'm moving in," I said with a small smile, hoping to ease whatever tension she felt. "This is my home." That should have been the end of it. A neighborly welcome back, or a polite nod would have sufficed. Instead, her lips pursed into a thin line, her eyes narrowing with doubt. "I don't think so," she shot back. "I know everyone in this neighborhood, and I would have known if someone new was moving in." The audacity. I chuckled, though irritation was creeping into my tone. "Well, I'm not new. I've owned this property for years." That was when her eyes flashed with something more than suspicion. Fear? Anger? Perhaps both. Karen, the name suited her, wasn't used to being wrong. The 911 call, a mistake in the making. Before I could get another word in, Karen had already whipped out her phone, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping 911 like she was calling in a national emergency. "Yes, hello? I'd like to report a trespasser," she said, her voice dripping with exaggerated concern. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just annoying anymore. It was dangerous. I had heard too many stories of innocent people getting caught in situations just like this, situations that ended poorly because someone decided their personal suspicions were more important than facts. "Ma'am," I tried again, keeping my voice measured, "I don't know what you think is happening here, but you're making a mistake." She didn't even look at me as she spoke into the phone. "He's refusing to leave." "Yes, send someone immediately." My jaw clenched. The audacity, the entitlement, it was infuriating. Did she truly believe she was some kind of hero, saving the neighborhood from what? A homeowner returning to his own property. The worst part was, I knew exactly why she was so quick to assume the worst. It had nothing to do with property deeds, and everything to do with the way she had already decided I didn't belong. The arrival of the police. Minutes felt like hours as I waited on my own front porch, arms crossed, watching Karen stand triumphantly like she had single-handedly protected the community from an invisible threat. The flashing red and blue lights painted streaks across the quiet suburban street, an unnecessary spectacle for a situation that never should have escalated this far. Two officers stepped out of their patrol car, their eyes scanning between me and Karen, whose expression had shifted from righteous indignation to the satisfied smirk of someone who believed they were about to be proven right. "Officers," Karen called out, striding toward them as if she had personally summoned the cavalry. "This man refuses to leave the property. I don't know who he is, but he's not supposed to be here." I watched as the officers turned to me, their expressions unreadable but professional. I had two choices: react with the frustration I was feeling or handle this calmly. I chose the latter. "Good evening, officers," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I can clear this up right now." I reached into my pocket, slowly, because I wasn't about to take any risks, and pulled out my ID, along with documents proving ownership of the house. The officer nearest to me took them, scanning the details carefully. Karen was already gearing up for another protest, but before she could say anything, the officer turned to her. "Ma'am," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious, "this man is the legal owner of the property. He's not trespassing." A public confrontation. Silence. Then, a choking sound came from Karen, like she had swallowed her own words. "That can't be right," she blurted out, shaking her head. "There must be a mistake. I oversee the neighborhood watch. I would have known." But her words faltered as the realization hit. She had been so sure, so ready to cast judgment, so eager to play the role of the enforcer, that she hadn't stopped to consider the truth. The murmurs began. Other neighbors had stepped outside, drawn by the flashing lights and the escalating situation. I could see their expressions, some shocked, some amused, and a few that held the same suspicion Karen had carried. But the tide was turning. The officers, growing impatient, issued a warning. "Ma'am, making a false police report is a serious offense. You wasted valuable resources tonight." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face burned red, but whether it was from embarrassment or indignation, I couldn't tell. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was exhausted. This was my home, my neighborhood, and yet, in Karen's eyes, I would never be anything more than an outsider. But she had learned a lesson that night. Assumptions come with consequences. And the biggest mistake anyone can make is thinking they know everything when, in reality, they know nothing at all.